What is going on, everybody? James here with Fish Room Fever, and today I want to share with you one of my tips and tricks for making maintenance easier in the fish room in terms of siphoning water and doing water changes. But the big thing we're going to go over in today's video is, I guess, phase one of rearranging the fish room. Now, if you remember, you already saw the video where I kind of did a walkthrough of a couple of the fish room areas and what my plan is for them. But basically, for what I'm doing today, I've got a rack of 16 10-gallon tanks. Then I've got this rack next to it. It's got a 90-gallon on top and one of the old school 100-gallon 5-foot tanks down on the bottom. What we're going to do is we're going to break down those 16 tanks on that rack, get rid of that, take this here and flip it up against the wall. Now, I've got a lot of water drained out already. I've still got quite a few fish to catch and move, and a lot of water to get rid of, and a lot of tanks to pull out. Another thing I'm going to have to do is move my linear air pump from Aquarium Co-op, which, big stream out of the way, that guy there. Going to have to redo that. I will say I've moved it a couple times because I've kind of redone things before, and it's super easy to change things around and set things back up, redo the plumbing on it. Really simple. So if you're wondering about getting one of those, and maybe you're not in your final design stages, go ahead and do it. I mean, I've had this thing run in a loop. Right now I've just got it run where both the ends are capped off. So there's one end down there capped off, and the other end is all the way down the hallway, run into the fish room where I do the live streams from. But I highly recommend it. I've got way more sponges hooked up than they even say it will handle. Not that I'm necessarily recommending that, just that it can definitely do what they say it will do. These guys are not happy I've got their water level down, but this is going to be fun trying to slide this sideways. Let me go over here to the table because I need both hands for this. I want to show you all my tip for doing water changes, or if you've got to break tanks down and drain things and refill things. Makes life a lot easier. Alright, so we've got a couple different pieces of plumbing over here, and I guess I want to apologize for the background noise. Normally I try and have things a lot quieter, but I saw the trash on the table and it reminded me I did have to change a pump out earlier on the other rack over there that you kind of saw on the left. It went out, and fortunately I had this other pump that I had purchased at a fish swap. Gotta love going to fish swaps, you never know what you'll find. But it was brand new in package. I purchased it for another project which you all are going to see hopefully within the next 3 or 4 weeks, when we set up the 220 gallon and sump it and plumb it. But short term, I put it on that rack. Now it flows way too much noise wise. Again, I'm sorry for that, but it gets the job done of keeping the water flowing and keeping the fish happy and healthy. So here's my tip. First off, if you don't own some sort of Python or Aqueon water changing system with the hose and the siphon and all that, I recommend you get one. Now, the caveat to that is, if you get the Aqueon brand like I have, the threading is different between Python and Aqueon, or at least on the sets I have it is. So what I've actually done is spliced an old piece of garden hose onto my tubing, and I just bought a little 33-cent splice there, hose fixer. That way I could have the proper threading to be able to hook this Python hook on there. And that's one of the big things that I want to recommend is you get one of these Python hooks. They're really convenient. To go one step further than that though, get you some 1-inch PVC. Now, depending upon how many different tank setups and sizes you have, you could get one of the little 3-foot sections and cut it and make it work. I've got a lot of different tank depths and a lot of different purposes I use this for. Maybe I want to do a 50% change on a 2-foot tall tank. Maybe I want to do a 75% change. So that, and I've got the same stuff I used for plumbing in the Co-op air pump. So I've got a lot of plumbing lying around. I use 1-inch for just about everything. But what you can do if you've got one of these Python hooks is slide that on there. Then you can hook this onto the tank at whatever depth you're wanting to drain to. And then I've got a pre-filter sponge. You can find stuff like this on the Co-op. Not sponsored, I just buy a lot of stuff there. But you can get you a pre-filter sponge and stick it on the end of there. I use that because I've got a lot of small fish. I've got a lot of guppies and endlers and shrimp as well. So this keeps me from having to worry about sucking up any babies. And it is a coarse pre-filter sponge, so it allows a lot of that gunk to go through there. Other tip, and the final tip, and then I'll get into moving things, and I'll let you all check back in on that after I get some tanks broken down. But when you go to refill, if you've got a sand substrate, you've got some shorter tanks, maybe you don't want to disrupt the substrate, when you go to refill, even if you don't have that PVC shooting it all the way down to the bottom, the flow coming out of there can still disrupt that substrate, especially if it's a dirty tank with sand cap. That's where you can run into some actual problems disrupting the substrate. So when I fill up, what I like to do is just take 2 elbows and then a smaller cut piece, and you can cut this to whatever size. That way when I fill up, I hang it on the tank and the water's flowing upwards away from the substrate. So I hope some of you find that helpful. I'm going to get to moving some tanks, and we'll check back here in a little bit and see how it's going. Alright, so just a quick check-in. The top row of tanks is gone. All the fish are out, the filters are pulled. Now one thing I did do is siphon a bucket of tank water, and all of my good sponge filters I'm throwing in there. And I'm defining good by tanks that have absolutely zero hair algae in them. Filters are going in there. The ones that do have hair algae, I'm going to clean them up, and we're going to let that dry out. And once we know there's not going to be any hair algae coming back, I'll get those put back into aquariums so we can go ahead and start getting them seeded. So when we do need them, we'll have them ready to set up tanks or whatever we may need them for. Figured I'd let y'all take a look at some guppies while I was talking to you. But that's pretty much that. Another thing, one of the reasons I like the hook method so much, sorry I'm trying to reach so I don't know what I'm pointing the camera at, probably just the post, is once the tanks, slide these guys over, I'm going to put a sponge on this before I do this tank because it's got some shrimp down in it, but once the tanks get down to where that is about to stop draining, they're low enough that I can actually pull the tank out, slide it out, tip it forward to be able to get more water out of it. So I can get just about all the water out of it, or I can leave just a little bit. In this case, I'm going to leave a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is just dump this through. Since there's no substrate in here, I'm just going to dump it through a large fish net on a 5-gallon bucket. So I'll just take a fish net, stick it on. Actually, I can show you. I'll use a net bigger than this. But I'll take a fish net. We'll put it on a 5-gallon bucket. And I've shown this trick before, but we've had a lot of subscribers since then. So one of my things that I like to do when I'm using nets, and this is the same for maybe unbagging fish from a fish store, or, go to a swap meet or a fish meetup and get a bunch of fish, and you're taking things out of bags after you floated them, is I like to take and clip the nets onto the bucket. That way you're not trying to make sure that that net doesn't fall in. So just clip that on there. Again, it's going to be a bigger net. We'll dump that tank water through there. It'll catch all the shrimp and stuff. Then I can just lower it down into some water and net them out of there instead of chasing them through the tank. But I'm going to get back to work, and we'll see how it goes. Alrighty, so we got that rack moved out of there. I kind of short-term plumbed the co-op pump right there. I just kind of pieced a couple things together to keep all the sponge filters running throughout all the tanks while I was working on this. Next step is to finish getting this drained down, drain the bottom out, and flip it around. Now as you can see, there is a window back there. I'm sure somebody will comment about the tank in front of the window, but for one, I've got the back spray painted black on both of these tanks, and for two, I will probably put in a blackout curtain there. But most importantly, that window actually receives zero direct sunlight throughout the day. There's no point during the day that it actually gets any direct sunlight through it. You just get the ambient light from it being bright outside. So I'm going to get these tanks drained, get this spun around, and I will get back with you. These guys are really not happy about the lower water level. I'll be right back. Alright, so it is complete. we got that rack spun around. It was not fun. I drained the tanks down about 4 inches of water in each of them, as far as I could go without the fish wanting to lay over the top tank. I've got that larger green terror in there, so I had to leave several inches so he wasn't flopping around. And then I just used an extra 2x4 that I had right there underneath the bottom to kind of help leverage it and just slide the thing around. I've got wood floors, so that helps. Sorry, it's pretty loud at the moment with, you know, the tank filling up and then the water from the pump splashing, but I think it came out nicely. Gives a nice access to over there, and we've got some plans for that rack in the not too distant future, so stay tuned for that. I probably will go in this empty space right here and put one of my smaller cube nano tanks. I've got one, it's somewhere between 7 and 10 gallons. It's actually the tank that I put the betta in my most recent video, the unboxing from Big City Bettas. I'll probably put it right there just to kind of fill that gap. Ideally, I would really like the 5-foot tank to be on top and the 4-foot tank. The top tank's a 90 gallon again. I'd like it to be on the bottom, but because the top one is actually plumbed for a reef, it's what they would call reef ready. So it's got the built-in overflow and all that. I have it up top so it flows down to the bottom. Now I have these two tanks set up so that they can run on one system and be one total volume of water. I'll probably run it like that for a day or so because I've got a canister filter. I'd had them separated on separate systems for a while now, just because I wanted different things going in different tanks, but I've got a canister on the bottom, so I'm going to use that to help clean up some of the water. As you can see, there's some particulate up in that tank. You can particularly see it in there. So I'll probably leave them on the same system with that pump running up right there and then draining back out right there. I used to have a wet dry or a trickle filtration system attached to this, but I'm not going to go through setting that back up again. And then I will turn that pump off and we'll have two separate systems again. I did temporarily put the co-op pump where you saw earlier on the side there. I'm going to be adding more tanks. I've got the 220 gallon that's going to be going just over next to me. It is back there, and it's going to go on that wall. So I am going to re-plumb the central air to this whole room, but I'm not doing that today. And I'm going to wait until that tank's set up and the other things are moved around the fish room before I actually do the final air plumbing. It's so easy to redo that I could just do it now and fix that side, if you will, but there's really no point to it. I do want to come back at some point. I don't want to make any promises, but in the not too distant future, and actually do a decent, legitimate decorating job on these two tanks. Finish putting substrate in them. I just have some in there for some biological areas for beneficial bacteria to grow. Maybe do an aquascape in one of them. I don't know. We've got the green tear up top, and then we've got some larger cichlids down below. So probably not going to do much with plants, but we could do some decent driftwood and stone up top and a few plants, and that green terror would probably be okay with that. But I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you've made it this far and you haven't subscribed, and hit that like button, do me a favor. Hit both of those. Totally free. It does help me out, and I really appreciate it. Stay tuned for more updates in the fish room and more tips on how to move tanks and improve your quality of life while either downsizing, moving, or setting up new tanks. Until next time, keep your fish healthy, keep yourselves healthy, catch yourself a little fish room fever. Take care, everybody.